Okay, well, I think we're good. If we get some late stragglers, they can join as we walk our way through. Cool. So once, like I said just now, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate people giving up their time to spend a couple of hours with us on a Wednesday afternoon. The topic for today's kind of hands-on lab is Matillion MAIA. So the agenda that we've got today is we'll have a handful of slides, maybe the next like 20, 25 minutes. We'll walk through a set of slides just to give context to what Matillion is, what MAIA is. We're also going to be using Snowflake as well in this lab. So a little introduction to those different technologies. And then we've got about 60 to 90 minutes, I guess, to do a hands-on lab. We'll see how far we get. Typically, we run over. Just some etiquette as we go through. If you have any questions, that you have a chat that's enabled, you're welcome to post questions in there. I've got my colleagues with me. So I've got my colleague Reza, who's been in communication with you. The vet, who's going to give me some technical assistance. So if you have any challenges as you go through, the vet's going to be looking at the chat and hopefully can help you out. We're going to go through a reasonable pace. There's plenty to get through. There's a whole load of content that we'll provide you as we go through that you can go and follow along at your own pace afterwards. So if you do get lost, you know, all the materials are available to actually complete the labs at your own pace. The environment that we've set up is a trial account, so you'll all have access to that account for, I think, about the next 10 to 14 days. Once that expires, then your access will be revoked. So you can play around in that environment even after today's session. So who are we? So we are Datalab. We are Matillion Gold partners. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means that we understand the technologies, we're certified on the technologies, we help clients implement Matillion as part of their strategy when it comes to things like data architecture, data engineering. And Matillion is like a part of the Snowflake kind of ecosystem. So we help clients deliver Snowflake and Matillion solutions from end to end. So just a little bit more about Datalab, the kinds of services and what we do for clients. So, you know, we typically spend a lot of our time helping customers understand data strategy. So that really is around understanding your requirements as a business, what's your strategy as a business, and then what data assets can we use to help drive that strategy, whether that's to increase revenue or reduce costs or increase efficiency. How can we use those data assets to actually drive value? The result of that is typically to deliver some kind of cloud architecture. So whether that's brand new greenfield sites or whether that's migrating to on-premise solutions, we help customers with that kind of roadmap. How do you actually move from one state using legacy technologies to a cloud-first architecture? And then where we spend a lot of our time is in data engineering, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And we're going to see how we can use large language models and Matillion's MAIA, which is a little agent, to actually automate the process of data engineering, so creating that digital workforce. Beyond that, we've got all of our data now into something like Snowflake. It's really about how do you exploit that data. So that's delivering the right data to the right people at the right time and in the right format. So that could be PDF reporting, it could be dashboards, it could be messages. We help exploit that data to make good business decisions at the right time. And then an interesting area where we get involved more recently is about data monetization. So that's helping customers either deliver value-added services to their customers, or that's around actually monetizing the data that they actually have acquired. And there's various different strategies around data monetization that companies can now utilize. And Snowflake's really good for this because it has this data sharing capability where you can share data with other Snowflake users. And then one thing that we're really keen on doing, and hence where we're running these kind of labs today, is capability development. So we want to equip teams with the skills and the knowledge to be able to use these technologies effectively. And so we kind of advocate for this technology stack. So that's what Datalab does. If you have any questions, you'd like to find out more about what we do, you're welcome to reach out to Reza or William, who's also on this call. You're welcome to reach out to either of those two or myself. And see how we might be able to help you or assist you in any of these areas. So what's our promise to clients? So typically it's, giving them the ability to access their data, being able to enhance that data, whether that's combining it, transforming it, sanitizing it, creating things like master data type solutions. So really like leverage the data that you have in your organization. We want to, as a result of that, ensure that the data can be trusted. So create that single point of truth, and obviously make sure that it's secure. Increasingly, like organizations are having lots and lots of requirements around data exploitation. And so one of the key kind of pillars to deliver on is enabling self-service. So whether that's self-service analytics or self-service reporting, hopefully you'll see today how MAIA could be used to help you with some of those scenarios. And then it's about building out the technology, the infrastructure. So building a capable platform. And at Datalab, we use this word platform quite regularly because what we're really talking about is building a technology stack which has got lots of different capabilities, and that you can come to that technology stack and actually be able to use the different tools to solve particular problems. So, and then beyond that, it's around data automation. We're going to see a lot of that with MAIA today. And the end result should be that you're removing data silos, you're getting that single version of the truth. It's nice and secure. It's got lots of value, and your organizations can make great decisions. So that's enough about Datalab. We're going to get into the heart of the presentation now, which is to talk about Matillion. And so Matillion's got two different products. They have a legacy product called Metal, but their new cloud-first product, which is what we're going to focus on today, is called the Data Productivity Cloud. If you hang around the halls of organizations that are using Matillion, they'll typically refer to this as DPC. So if you hear people using acronyms, then like DPC, now you know what it stands for. We're not going to try and use any acronyms today because it just makes it very difficult for you to understand what we're talking about. So what is the Data Productivity Cloud? So the Data Productivity Cloud is a data pipeline platform. So Matillion helps you move data or orchestrate data from one location to another. It empowers data teams to build, manage pipelines faster for AI and analytics at scale. One of the slides that I'll share later on is around Snowflake, but one of the foundational kind of terms that Snowflake uses that there's no AI strategy without a data strategy. And so tools like Matillion allow you to build that confident data platform that you can then go and put AI use cases on top of. So what is Matillion? So under the hood, Matillion is made up of various different like components. Excuse me. These are the use cases that Matillion can be utilized for. So on the left-hand side of this diagram, we've got structured data, semi-structured data, and various other data sources. So structured data would be things like databases where you've got all of your transactional kind of records. Semi-structured data would be things like JSON or log files. And then below that, we've got unstructured data. So increasingly, we can tap into data sources like video, audio, images, and we can use large language models in particular to extract data from those images. So for example, we could ask questions of an image like what products are available, what brands are there, how many people are in the photo, what color is a vehicle, all sorts of different pieces of information that we can extract to create structured data that we can then do analysis on. So on the left-hand side, we've got all of our different data sources, and where Matillion gets involved is it helps us curate, manage, and basically move that data into a data warehouse kind of environment where we can do analytics. So it's got a low-code set of tools. It also has high code, so you can write code if you want to. But what we're going to see today is the kind of UI where we're going to ask MAIA to basically build pipelines for us, and we'll go through how that actually works. And Matillion also does pipeline orchestration, so things like scheduling. It also helps you to manage your code, so the kind of data ops or DevOps side of things as well. And so Matillion sits on top of your cloud data platform, so whether that's tools like Snowflake or Synapse or Databricks, and can be deployed on various different hyperscalers, so AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure. We're going to be using MAIA, which I say is like a large language model, an agent that's using a large language model. But within Matillion itself, you can also access other tools like other large language models or vector data stores to do other kinds of analytics. And then on the far right-hand side, we've got all the various different workloads that you'd expect, having curated all that data that you can take advantage of. Here's just a couple of examples of kind of structured and unstructured data sources that you might have in your organization. So how does Matillion drive productivity? So it basically gives everybody in the organization the ability to access and transform data at scale. It fits seamlessly into your existing ecosystem. So whether you're on any one of those different hyperscalers and whether you're using any of those different database technologies, the user interface and the experience with Matillion is exactly the same. And so you're kind of abstracted from the kind of platform itself. And increasingly, it's got AI-ready capabilities kind of baked in. So really taking advantage of the kind of AI wave that we're on. Those technologies are baked into the platform again, so abstracting you from having to do all the plumbing necessary to take advantage of large language models and AI at scale. You'll see this manifested across the stack. So in terms of everyone ready, the visual UI, Git integration, pipeline templates. So for example, if you have LinkedIn data that you'd like to extract, transform and load into your data warehouse, they have pre-baked pipelines that actually deploy a whole solution for you. There's a whole connectors library that allows you to connect to various different APIs. And if that doesn't have the API that you want, you can build your own through a very, very simple kind of co-piloted experience. And so you can really access any data and any structure and bring that into your environment. It's stack ready, so there's various different ways to deploy Matillion. You can have completely in the cloud, or you can have a hybrid where it's 50% in the cloud, 50% on premise, and everything is pushed down into those database platforms. So once you've extracted your data, landed it into those databases, you're basically pushing down code into the likes of Snowflake, Databricks to actually execute. And then it's got great data lineage and great integration with other CDPs. And then from an AI perspective, you'll see there's lots of different components that we can use to, and we'll explore some of those. And you can do things like retrieval augmented generation. So this is the ability for you to create your own kind of chatbots. So you can do a lot of the kind of data engineering work that you need to do to be able to provision those kind of services. Vector stores are used in those kind of deployments as well. And again, there's a whole load of lineage baked in. So that's enough about Matillion, like the general platform. We're here to really like investigate MAIA. So I've got a couple of slides now just to kind of prefix like why Matillion are doing this and what MAIA actually is. So in order to kind of drive data productivity, Matillion's got a vision to achieve like 100x your productivity. So you'll see in a moment, I'm going to go through the Matillion roadmap. Right now, we might not be in that particular space where we're getting 100 times productivity from you as a data engineer or a business analyst. But the idea is to create the tooling inside of Matillion that will allow you to actually like scale your productivity. And that's where MAIA comes in. It's your digital labor. It's your companion. So you can give MAIA a whole load of different tasks, send MAIA off, and let her go and do that work while you focus on something else. So MAIA is like a true digital data engineer. So it empowers users to talk in natural language, and it will translate that into code for you. You can author pipelines in business language. You can easily create these kind of low-code pipelines by simply writing a whole load of prompts. Now, as we go through the hands-on lab a little bit later, we've given you prompts that you can go and execute. And we're using a template to basically ensure that all of you have a similar output at the end of the process. It's by no means the way that you can interact with MAIA. You can have a much more conversational interaction with her. As you want to build pipelines, but for the purposes of building a lab and making sure that we all can go and follow it along, we've created templates that basically give MAIA a set of instructions to follow. The idea is that you are going to be able to multiply your productivity. So really take away a lot of the mundane tasks that you might do as a data engineer or that you might do as an analyst, and let you focus on the more complicated human type tasks. And then, hopefully over a period of time, get the best of both. And it's self-service for everybody. So it really accelerates the work skilled data engineers can actually do. As I say, take away some of the mundane things, and it also democratizes access to data. So, whether you can write SQL or not, whether you understand how to manipulate data or not, you can come to tools like this and actually build quite sophisticated pipelines by literally going through a process of prompt engineering and talking with an agent. So the aim of this slide is really to kind of give you a view of the kind of Matillion roadmap and the maturity curve that they're trying to take you on and take the product on. So, initially, the kind of bottom left-hand corner shows like how you might work with Matillion as a normal user. Like the productivity gains are relatively low. So you can come to Matillion, you can start building pipelines yourself. It's a great tool. It's very easy to use, but you're not really going to increase your productivity exponentially. So with the introduction of MAIA, we now get access to a whole load of different tools where you can interact with an LLM and you can ask MAIA to go and do tasks for you. As the product matures and the roadmap is going to be delivered relatively quickly, you'll get to this point where you have co-pilots and automation and self-driving intelligent agents, where agents will basically collaborate to kind of build solutions. So the intent there will be that, let's say you want to access a brand new system, you'll be able to go and give a prompt to MAIA and it will go away, develop the connections to that particular source, understand the actual domain of that particular source of data, translate your requirements, and go through a whole process of building you an end-to-end pipeline without you actually being involved. The product's not there yet. This is the roadmap. So we're somewhere between that 3x and 10x type productivity gains. But hopefully you'll see as we go through the hands-on lab that it will certainly improve your working experience right now, and you'll be able to deliver a lot more quickly using the tooling. MAIA is really for anyone. So, if you're a business analyst and you want to quickly understand some data and get some insights, you can ask MAIA to do some kind of data analysis and profiling for you. If you're a data architect, you can ask MAIA to design you ERD diagrams and models. If you're an engineer, it will build you pipelines. And if you're doing QA type work, then you can ask MAIA again to do some form of QA and build some automation in terms of testing. And then if you're in operations, you can oversee all these different workflows and you can actually understand what MAIA is actually doing. So there's a broad set of capabilities that's delivered by MAIA. We're really going to focus on the data engineering side today in terms of what we're going to build. But you can do a whole load of other tasks as well. And if you want to find out, you simply just ask MAIA, just ask it, what kind of problems can you help me with? And you'll see the kind of problem statements that you can help solve. In terms of the roadmap, then, just to give you a little bit more detail. So at the moment, we're doing transformations and pipelines. We'll see today in terms of how it can manage some basic orchestration and some basic data ops. So actually, if you want to, you can ask MAIA to actually commit your code for you and do those kind of things. We won't do that in our lab, but that's basically where the product is currently. It's in that assist and empower kind of state. In the future, it will be augmenting and then becoming more pervasive. So you can see there the roadmap that Matillion have laid out for us. So how does MAIA actually work? It works something like this. So you'll ask a question, you'll give it a business prompt. There's a agentic layer in between. So MAIA's got access, obviously, to the database that you're working with. It understands the sources of data that you're trying to connect to. It has its own frame of reference in terms of understanding how to build data pipelines, how to do data engineering. And so using that context, and that's a key word, context. So giving it some context and instructions, the more instructions we give it, better MAIA will be at delivering the output that we expect. So given all of that context, it will then create something called a YAML file. So that's the underlying versioning of Matillion. So Matillion creates YAML files, which is its code base. You'll see through the Matillion interface, you get these nice UIs where you can actually see the flow of information. So that YAML file is then translated into a nice GUI visual representation that you can actually see. And then that's the process back to you in terms of you understanding what MAIA's actually kind of delivered. And so you can go through that iterative process. And while it's going through, you'll see that you can see the reasoning that Maia's going through. It will do things like data profiling. It will ask you for your permissions to go and access certain pieces of information and pieces of data. But essentially, it's trying to get as much information as possible to ensure that it's delivering the outputs that you've asked for. Only a couple more slides, and then we can get into the hands-on stuff. So Maia's made up of two kind of components. There's the control plane, where you interact, and that's the kind of the front end that you're going to be working with. And then there's the data plane. So these could both exist in the cloud, or you can basically split them up. So the control plane lives in the cloud, and the data plane actually lives inside your own infrastructure. So you can deploy the Matillion agent, the worker bee that actually does the orchestration and manages the push down of code. And you can manage that on premise. But the Matillion control plane lives in the cloud. It's web-based, and it's basically got a whole series of agents under the hood that are being leveraged to answer your questions. So whilst we deal directly with Maia, behind the scenes, Maia's made up of a whole series of different agents with different roles and different personas that it's actually orchestrating and managing to deliver the outcomes that you want. Cool, I'm going to skip this slide and just jump straight into some Snowflake stuff. So that's hopefully some background to Maia. If you've had any questions, hopefully Riza and Devet have been asking them. If you do put a whole load of questions in there, I'll try and go through them a little bit later as we go through the hands-on lab. So what is Snowflake? Hopefully some of you have come to this today with some background as to what Snowflake is. So Snowflake is a data analytics platform. As I mentioned, they've got a great slogan, which is there's no AI strategy without a data strategy. And so delivering on that, Matillion, and again, if you've ever seen any Snowflake presentations, this should be quite familiar to you. Snowflake's made up of a whole load of different services. So again, it's got that ability to work with unstructured, semi-structured and structured data. So you can see now the companionship between a product like Matillion and a product like Snowflake is that they can handle all these different data types for you. The cool thing about Snowflake is its architecture. So they separate compute from storage, which means that basically you can scale the compute infinitely for different tasks. Different users can have different compute. And so there's never any of these kind of contentions when you're processing large volumes of data that you might have in a traditional on-premise environment. So I can scale up the compute for my daily ETL process and give Matillion a whole load of compute for it to go and do its processes. And at the same time, I can create a separate set of compute for my end users to go and use to query the data. And the two things won't compete with each other. We're going to focus a little bit on their Cortex AI features. So that is the umbrella capabilities. So during the course of the lab today, what we're going to do is we're going to take some unstructured data. So we're going to take some audio files, some transcripts of call center conversations. So we're going to take some MP3 files. We're going to basically translate those or transpose those into a transcript. We're going to save that textual transcript into Snowflake. We're then going to use Matillion to create various pipelines for us where we take that transcript and using these Cortex features, which are basically, we're going to do some prompt engineering. We're going to summarize the transcript. We're going to give it a sentiment score. We're going to extract the call center agent's details and information from the transcript. And at the end of that, we'll end up with a nice table of structured data that we can then use to transform into a data warehouse structure. So we're going to go from completely unstructured data in MP3 files all the way through, hopefully, to a data warehouse schema with a fact table and dimensions that you can actually then go and use to do some analysis. What are some of the guiding principles of Snowflake? And hopefully some of these things will come through in the lab, is that it should be really easy to use, should be really efficient and really trusted. So as I mentioned, we're going to do quite sophisticated work with some large language models inside of Snowflake itself. And so just for clarity, we've got Maia, which is part of Matillion, which is an agent. It's also going to be using large language models to take your prompt and generate SQL and push that down into Snowflake. But the types of transformation that we're going to ask Snowflake to actually do will take advantage of large language models inside of Snowflake itself to actually transform the data and extract information from these MP3s so it can do some really cool call center analysis. In terms of Snowflake's Cortex AI features, there's a whole breadth of different capabilities. If you've got more interest in this, we're running a series of pure Snowflake Cortex AI labs in person, one here in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg in the coming months. We'll share some details with you around those in due course. But Snowflake's Cortex is made up of a whole load of different features. We're going to be focusing on this top right feature set up here called Cortex AI SQL. So this is Snowflake's wrapper over a large language model. So what it actually does is it integrates a large language model in SQL into, wraps a large language model up into some SQL functions that you can use. So you can actually do quite sophisticated data transformations without actually having to put any plumbing in place. So as an example, we're going to be using some of these functions later on. So I'll just kind of briefly go through a couple of them now. But here you can see this looks very SQL-esque, doesn't it? We've got a select statement, we've got a from statement, we've got a where clause. And here we've got one of these functions. So this is the extract answer Snowflake function. Here we're passing in the transcript column and we're going to ask a question. So this extract answer function wants you to actually ask a question that you'd actually have a question mark at the end of it. So we're not going to ask or put a prompt in here that says summarize something for me. We're going to ask it a very specific question which we expect an answer. So here you can see this is the prompt that we're going to pass in. Here's the transcript, and then we would get some kind of response. The response that's going to be returned is going to be a piece of JSON. And so what's cool about Snowflake, if you've never used Snowflake before, is once you've referenced the column, you can actually reference it directly afterwards. So here I can actually reference that response column. I can ask it to basically return the answer and the score attributes from that JSON and actually put these into my data set. And then I can use that score as a kind of confidence score to say whether I want to use that result or not. And this is the kind of design pattern that you'll use when using Snowflake functions or these Cortex functions. So here's just another couple of examples, because we won't go into a great detail about this as we go through the Matillion lab. But just so you know, this is what it's going to be doing under the hood. So here again, we've asked it for sentiment. So it's going to take that transcript, and we're actually going to, in the lab, ask for it to do two things with sentiment. One of them is going to be to give us a sentiment score. So it's going to be a score between -1 being negative sentiment and 1 being positive sentiment. We're also going to ask it to give us a label as well, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. So again, we can decide from a reporting perspective, do we want to show a drop down that's, where someone could select positive, neutral, negative, or do we want a scale where they can actually filter some data? So we're going to give users in the end, different options. There's a summarize function. So here again, we're passing in the transcript and we're able to ask it to summarize that transcript. And so there's no plumbing that we need to put in place to do this. It's all baked into Snowflake already. So it just makes it really easy for us to access large language models and do various different transformations to unstructured or semi-structured data to turn it into something we can work with. And then the last function that I'm going to talk about is one called complete. So this is like the Swiss Army knife of Cortex functions. So here you can see what we're actually able to do is specify which large language model you want to use. So this is Snowflake's own large language model called Snowflake Arctic. But equally, we could use one of the GPT family. We could use Claude. It's got access to about 20 or 30 different large language models, and they're adding to that code base all the time. The really cool thing is, for me to switch from one large language model to another, I literally just have to change this piece of code. I don't have to put any of the plumbing in place. I don't have to create any accounts with any of those different providers. All of the large language models in Snowflake run inside of Snowflake itself. So none of your code or your data leaves Snowflake. And so basically, if you bring your data to Snowflake, you're able to run all of these processes within the confines of your environment securely. So here what we're doing is we've got the model that we've selected. Here we're actually doing some prompt engineering. So we're saying, cool, we can summarize the call center transcript. We can pass in the transcript as well. We could actually create different personas in here for different types of questions. You can get really sophisticated in terms of the input that you put into this particular function, as well as the output. So you can even specify what format of kind of response that you want. Do you want it tabulated? Do you want it in a JSON format? How do you want that JSON to be structured? And that way, later on, you can use it to push data into like tables and much easier. Cool. So that is all of the slides that we have. We're going to jump into to the lab. So we're going to break the lab up into various different parts. The configuration bit we've actually done for you already. So you should, and I'll take you through just now, access our Matillion environment and the Snowflake environment. The first steps, we're going to follow a traditional kind of development pipeline. So first of all, we're going to focus on extracting the data and getting that into Snowflake. So we've got two sources of data for this. We've got some audio, as I mentioned, some MP3 files, and then we've also got a JSON document, which we'll use for like some master data and some mappings to build out some of the other descriptive elements of our data model. We're then going to focus on staging that data up. So we're going to do the data engineering, the prompt engineering, in order to take that transcript that we're going to extract and build out a nice table of data. And then we'll then build a data warehouse pipeline. So we'll reorganize that nice staged data into a star schema data model that you'll actually be able to do some analysis on. If we have time, hopefully we'll get to a point where we might be able to use some of the other Snowflake features, but we'll see how far we go. So if you want to head over to this website, learning.datalab.co.za, we're actually going to follow on this lab that you'll see here in green. We're going to follow along with some of the elements there, and I'll direct you exactly where to go just now. But if you want to head over to learning.datalab.co.za, that would be great. Another site, and I'll post these links in the chat just now actually to make it easier. Another site that we're going to be heading over to is the kind of companion where all the code is for this particular lab. So you can head over to github.com, Datalab Solutions, and the code base for this lab is actually there as well. And then to make it easy for everybody, we've actually pre-created user accounts for you. So if you can find your name on the screen, and just remember that number, that'll be really important in the next step, which will be that number is going to be where you get access to all of the data. So you're going to have a username which uses that number. You're going to have a database that's going to be suffixed with that number. So if you can scan through there and identify your name, could have made it easy for you and put it in alphabetical order, but I chose not to. So if you scan through there and you find your name and your number, that will be great. Whilst you're doing that, I will post those links in the chat. Yes. All right. So hopefully you remembered your number. I've posted this link in the chat as well. So this is your Snowflake environment that we're going to be using. So in order to log into that, if you go to this particular location, you'll be asked for a username and password. It's highly secure. So it'll be the username will be student underscore and the number. If it's a single digit number, you need to prefix it with the 0. That goes for all of the different logons here. So you'll be student underscore 01. And your password will be Snowflake user is case sensitive with an exclamation mark. And again, the number 01 or whatever your number is. And likewise with the Matillion account, you'll access that at app.matillion.com. you'll get a version of code to actually use. So I'll show you this just now, so don't feel any apprehension as to where do you go and what do you do. You'll have your own branch, which will be your code base, and you'll access through that, you'll access the Matillion user interface. Cool, so that's it with all the slides. If you give me a couple of seconds now just to rearrange my screen so that we're ready to go through the lab. And you, in the meantime, if you can see if you can access at least the Snowflake account, you should have full access to that. And if you navigate over to matillion.com and log in using your work email address that you provided to us earlier on, then you should have access to Matillion Lab as well. See my screen again? So if you headed over to learningdatalab.co.za, this is what you should see. So you can see there's a whole load of other content on here. You're welcome to go and explore some of these other labs at your own leisure. We also run other training sessions where we'll go through these labs in a similar kind of classroom setting as today. We're going to focus on this Matillion MAIA call center analytics lab. So you're welcome to launch that lab. If you want to, you can go through this whole lab from beginning to end on your own. We've actually done steps 1 through to 4 for you. And we're going to start here at step number 5. But before I get there, I just want to show you what we're going to end up building today. So this should be the end result. So as I mentioned, we're going to take those MP3 files. We're going to integrate them or transform them and essentially turn it into a star schema that looks like this. So we're going to have identify who the agent is. We're going to give them a sentiment score and a label. We're going to identify the caller status, so whether it was resolved or unresolved, or there's follow-ups. We're going to identify the call type, whether it was a complaint, a request for information, and we're going to identify the priority, so whether it was high, low priority. So we're going to use the large language model to help us create all that kind of descriptive information. If you want to access the files, there's links here to all of the GitHub information. I clicked on this earlier on, so you'd end up somewhere like this. So you'd end up in Datalab Solutions. Here's our AI labs. Here's all the content for all the other labs that you saw earlier on. The one that we're interested in today is this Matillion MAIA call center lab. Again, you don't have to follow along now. I'm just showing you where all the content is if you wanted to do this on your own. We've done all these steps for you. But there is a zip file that contains a whole load of audio files. I think it's about 50 of them in there. Then there's this lookup JSON document as well. So this is all the content that you need to follow along with this lab. So hopefully you've been able to access your Matillion account. And if you have, you'll land on a projects folder that looks something similar to this. If you click on this MAIA lab, you'll go through into the actual project itself. So this is where your lab and your number is really important. As you can see, there's a lot of different branches of code here. If you navigate to the appropriate branch and you click on that, then you'll actually open up in the Matillion user interface. Your interface should look something like this when you arrive. If you manage to log into Snowflake, then your environment will look something similar to this. So here I've just opened up in advance a couple of screens. If you're in Snowflake, what you can do to start off with is you can go over to the left-hand side here. You can go to Data Catalog, and you can click on Data Explorer. So I'm just going to open this up in a new tab. So what you'll see in here is you'll see that there's a whole host of databases in here. Once again, the suffix here is your student number that you had earlier on. So if you follow along and you want to see what you're doing, then you can come and have a look at your database and see, the effect that you're having. We're going to use one particular script so that we can go and evaluate things are working as we go through. So the other place that you can go is up to the projects folder here on the left-hand side, and you can go to workspaces. So again, I'll open this up in a new tab. Yours will look slightly different to this. As you can see, I've already got some scripts in here already. But if you want to, you can go and click this Add New button and just say SQL file. You can give it a name. So I'm just going to call mine demo for now. And you can open that up. Now, in the links that I put in the chat a moment ago, you should have, there we go, you should have a link to this particular script. If not, I'll post it in there just now anyway. So this is the one. And we're going to use this script just to validate as we go through that everything we're doing is actually working. So you can either download it and re-upload it back into Snowflake. Otherwise, just Control-A, Control-C, copy everything, or click the Copy Raw File button here. We'll go back to the SQL that we created, and I'll just paste that in. The only other change that you're going to need to make to this is, again, just add your suffix to the end of this line 3 where it says use database call center analytics DW. Just put your student number in there. Cool. That was a lot of information, so I'll just give people a couple of seconds to catch up and make sure everything is, everyone can follow along. So there's a couple of ways to execute code in Snowflake, and just let you know how it actually works. So anywhere that you click in Snowflake, that line of code, if you click the run button here, it will execute that line of code. If you have longer blocks of code, it will actually execute between these kind of semicolons. So if you had like a whole SQL script, it will run all the code between 2 semicolons. So if you want to run multiple lines of code, then you can highlight like all 4 of them here. And that's what I'd suggest you do now, is just highlight those top 4 rows and hit run. And what we're doing here is we're setting what they call the context. So you'll see in the top right-hand corner, all of these things changed. So we're using the role. Let me just change that. You won't be able to use that. So you'll need that line of code at the top. So we're setting the context then. What role, what permissions do I have? This is the warehouse, so this is your compute. This is the database, so again, this should be your student number, and then the default, this is the schema that we're going to use. So the first thing we can just double check is that we've all got some documents. So if we run that code on line 10, what this is actually doing is it'll go into your database and actually read all the files that have all been uploaded for you already. So here we've got all the MP3 files already loaded. You should see that there's about 50 files there. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, there's 51 rows of data that's in that data set. We've actually got the files as well as this JSON document in this folder. So let's head back over to Matillion. So hopefully that gives you the context of this is where all of our data is going to land up. This is where all of the work's actually going to be done. But we're actually going to get Matillion to do all the work for us. So Matillion sits on top of Snowflake, and we're going to give MAIA, which is our little agent, a whole load of prompts, and it's going to do all the work for us. The first thing that I'd like everyone to do is, if this is what your screen looks like, if you navigate here on the right-hand side, go into this DDL folder and open up this particular job. So Matillion talks about jobs, and it's got two types of jobs. It's got orchestration jobs and it's got transformation jobs. And we're going to see both of them today. So you can tell what kind of job it is. So here, this is an orchestration job. So this basically, orchestration jobs are to do with data extraction and deploying like objects. So you can think of this as DDL, so deploying like database scripts and things like that. So it's data extraction and orchestration. And then transformation jobs is really what it says. It's about transforming data. And we'll see both of those as we go through. So we've created this job in advance. And so what this is going to do is create a whole load of objects in your database for you. So if you go and look back in Snowflake, in that Data Explorer tab, and you expand here, there's some schema here already. Let me choose this. There's some schema here. Somebody's already run some things. Pretty cool. But basically, there is some schema here already, but this job is going to go and deploy a whole load of schema for us. So here you can see we've got SQL script tasks. So these little icons are tasks. This whole thing is called a job. And you can start to see the kind of Snowflake, the Matillion user interface here. So we've got loads of configuration for each of these components. So here, for example, in this particular task, I'm asking it if you've created any of these objects already, go and drop them. And so here we're able to now create a whole ETL process that's going to drop any existing objects in our database and then go and redeploy all of them. The other thing you'll notice is that there's these different lines everywhere. This is basically controlling the flow of execution. And you can see that they've got different colors. So basically here, this is saying we're going to start here. All of these jobs can run concurrently. So all these tasks here will actually run concurrently. Only when all of them are successful and they're finished, we'll go to this particular task. And then from here, we'll start again. So you can do error trapping in here. You can change the status of these different tasks. So if it was a failure, you could redirect somewhere else and do some kind of corrective action. And so you've got control flow within inside of Matillion as well. Again, for completeness, I'll tell you that you can manage and create a whole load of different types of variables, but it's a bit out of scope for what we want to do today. So if you've opened this particular job, what we're going to do here is you can validate it if you want. So essentially, this is checking that you've got connectivity to the database and that it's able to go and deploy these particular tasks or run these tasks. And then we can click this run button at the top right. And so you can see that it's validated our job, and now it's gone away and executed that job. Cool. So we've now deployed a whole load of objects, and essentially this was the database schema that we want to load later on. So we've got our agent, call priority, call type, sentiment analysis. We've deployed a whole load of different structures into our database. So it's just a quick insight into what kind of you can do with Matillion in terms of managing your code and being able to deploy like a whole data warehouse environment. We're going to close that down, and then you should be back to a screen that looks something like this. So inside of our Matillion project, we've already created a folder structure already in advance. So again, when you come to this fresh, yours might look slightly different to this. But the one thing I wanted to draw your attention to is this folder at the top called Matillion. So inside of here, we've got some additional metadata or context that we've added for MAIA. So some of the things we're going to ask MAIA to do, it doesn't have that in its knowledge base already. So we've actually added these instructions already. So when we ask it some questions later on, it actually knows how to go and solve that particular question. This is one of the advantages as a developer group, as a set of data engineers, you can add a whole load of instructions to Maya in advance. So if you've got particular coding standards, if you've got particular development standards, naming conventions, if you want Maya to use particular design patterns to solve particular types of problems, you can put all of those instructions in here, and then that allows you to kind of start to standardize on your development practices. And in this instance as well, we're able to give it additional instructions that it hasn't got that body of knowledge. It doesn't know how to use this AI transcribe function from Snowflake. And so we've given it some instructions as to how to use it and when to use it. So we're going through this quite quickly, but this is really just to give you an idea of what the art of the possible is. We're going to go now into a whole load of prompting, and then we're going to see Maya actually building out these pipelines for us. So hopefully you've still got this walkthrough open. If we go down to step 5 here, where it says extract ETL, you'll see in these code blocks, these dark code blocks, is the prompt that we want you to use to actually start to build these pipelines. So we've been very explicit in telling Maya what to do, because we want all of you to end up with the same kind of results at the end of it. But in a more developer scenario, when you're working with Maya on your own use cases, it'll be much more conversational. But these kind of prompt templates are really good because you can actually version these. So I could go away and I could create these prompts. I could version those prompts. I could put those into GitHub, and I can actually recreate my end solution by actually passing these prompts to Maya every single time. So in terms of just like some thinking, it is very much the case that as these types of solutions and technologies grow, what's going to be more important is the prompt engineering aspect as opposed to the code. So what you're going to end up wanting to version is versioning the prompts and the instructions and those context files more than the code itself, because these agents will be able to go and rebuild code at will and do it very quickly. What you want to do is make sure that you're giving it the right list of instructions and that those are versioned and that you're coming out with the same kind of result every single time. So we're going to copy that prompt. We're going to go back to Matillion, and we're going to paste that into this little blocky at the top here where it says Ask Maya. So we're going to paste that in there. We're going to hit run. And so what Maya should do for us now is it should start thinking, it should start reasoning as to what it needs to do to kind of fulfill this set of instructions that we've given it. And so it will start doing that under the hood here, and then we'll start seeing through the interface. Once it's figured out what it needs to do, it should start building us some jobs and starting to build out that pipeline. So here it's created a job for us. It's given it the appropriate name that we've asked it to. It's now searching for the appropriate components. And then it will start adding these to the actual canvas that we can see here in the middle and building our job for us. So one of the cool things about doing these demos is that while Maya's doing these things, we could actually go away and make a cup of tea and do something else with our time. Cool. So now Maya's actually built our canvas for us. It's still thinking, it's still doing various different things, but we can start to interrogate and see what it's doing. So underneath or what this component's actually doing, let me just move these things a bit, is it's actually building some SQL for us. So right now we've actually got a script component here. It's used some of those instructions that I showed you moments ago to basically generate this SQL script. It's had a look at what's inside of our database. It understands that the data lives in this particular location, and it's built quite a sophisticated query for us to actually go and execute. So this SQL code now is going to be pushed down into Snowflake, and Snowflake's going to do all the heavy lifting. So this code's not going to run inside of Matillion. Matillion's going to orchestrate it. It's going to manage its execution, but it's actually being executed in Snowflake itself. So we can now go ahead and run that code. And so what this is actually doing is taking those MP3 files and pulling them into Snowflake for us. So we can go, if this is run successfully, as this one says it has, we can go back to our validation script. And we can just run this line of code here. So we can say select star from extract audio files. Your file might look slightly different to this. You won't actually have this piece of code here. But if you can go down to this line here and say select all from extract audio files, and you run that, you should see that you've got 50 rows of data in this table. So what it actually did is it pulled that MP3 file into Snowflake itself. And so here we've got like a representation of that MP3 file sitting inside of a table now. So still, this is in a binary format. We still haven't got to actually looking at the text that's inside this audio file. So that's what we're going to do in another step's time. But before we get there, what we're going to also do now is extract this JSON document. So we'll go back to our lab. We'll scroll down a little further, and we'll take our second plot. So we're going to copy that. We're going to go back to Matillion. What you can do here is, and I would recommend that you do this, is you clear the context. So here's a conversation that we've already had with Maia. If you're going to start something new, then I would say, cool, let's start a new chat so that you've got a clean slate. We'll paste that prompt in and we'll run it again. So this is going to create another job. And this job now is going to be to extract data from that JSON document and parse the JSON and turn it into a nice flat structure. So whilst it's doing that, I'll actually show you what the source looks like. So the source JSON document looks like this, and this is a typical design pattern that we use for kind of some master data, like lookup types of tables. So we've got a filter for filtering for a specific type of information. Here we're looking, we've got a code. If you want to do things based on ranges, you can have a lower and an upper bound. We've got a short description, we've got a long description or a name, and then we've got an actual description for what this information is. And so inside this file, there's lots and lots of different pieces of information that we'll use later on to basically build some of those dimensions, those descriptive components. But we've got all of that into one source of data, so it just makes it easier for us to manage. So whether you do this in JSON or you do this in an Excel spreadsheet or you do this in a database, this is quite a nice structure to follow to build like some master data lookup type tables. Cool. So whilst I've been rambling on, Maia's been busy in the background, and essentially it's created this SQL script for us. So from our prompt, it's figured out that where to go and get the data, and now it's able to create the appropriate SQL to basically parse a JSON document. So again, if you're coming to Snowflake for the first time and you don't know the Snowflake syntax for working with JSON documents, you don't need to, Maia does. So it's worked out that it can access that file here, and this is the syntax that you use to basically identify those different elements in the JSON. It's worked out how to go and name each of those elements for us, and it's going to go and load that into our extract lookup table. So again, we can actually run this job now. Let's validate that first. Ooh, let's run it. Reload this quickly. Okay, and we got some errors. Cool. So what we can do in this scenario is we can say, Maia to fix the errors for us. So it's found the error of its ways, and hopefully it will go and correct that for us so that we can load that data in. You might end up in a slightly different solution to the one that I've got here. So we're all interacting with MAIA in a different way. And it's using the context of previous conversations, the windows that we might have open, the context that it's found. And so we might all end up with slightly different solutions, but hopefully we'll end up with all the same kind of end result. Cool. So it will also give you suggestions here as to what you want it to do. So I'm actually going to ask MAIA to test this for me now. And because we're asking it to do something with our data, it's going to ask for permissions. Issues. That's really, yeah. Okay, cool. Catching up with us. Cool. So we've run that now, and we've got some data in our table, hopefully. So let's go and have a look. Cool. So it's finally loaded data in here, and now hopefully you can see the structure of that data a little bit clearer. So here we're going to use these filters later on to filter for specific sets of data that we can actually load in there. So that's the nice thing about using MAIA. We went through various different iterations now, but we got to an end result that actually ran and was successful. So we've managed to extract both sets of data now. So we're going to move on to actually staging up our data and some of the more interesting kind of transformations. So if we go on to step 6 of our lab, what we're going to do now is we're going to ask MAIA to actually take the MP3 files that we loaded into Snowflake. We're actually going to ask it now to transcribe them. So it's going to use this AI_transcribe function, which is a function inside of Snowflake that knows how to take an audio file and convert that into a textual transcript. So we're going to copy this prompt. I'm just going to close these down. If you have these open, just save some real estate there. I'm going to clear my conversation, and then we're going to start from scratch. So this function AI_transcribe is a relatively new function inside of Snowflake. So Matillion hasn't yet caught up in terms of like providing us components for that particular function. So we gave it some additional context in the rules files that I showed you at the beginning. And so it knows now what it needs to do to be able to use that particular function. And so hopefully we'll create us some SQL to actually transcribe those audio files into a transcript. I noticed that a couple of people have got some issues with running the SQL stuff inside of Snowflake. It's not important. All the work we're going to do is from now on is going to be inside of Matillion. We're not really going to go and look at Snowflake much beyond what we've done already. If you looked at this prompt in detail, what you'll see here is that we asked it to do an incremental load of audio transcriptions. So we're hoping here that Maya is going to go away and build the logic into our pipeline to only load new transcripts. So if we were doing this in a real world scenario, we wouldn't want to transcribe the same audio files again and again. That would become very expensive, particularly as we're using now a large language model to basically take that unstructured data and transcribe it into text. So this basically is a mechanism for us to say, cool, if you already have that file in the database, don't go and transcribe it again. And so just by using that terminology, Maya's hopefully going to build us an incremental ETL process. It's asking us for some permissions. You might get prompts like this because it wants to go and read what's in the source data. So I'm going to accept all the permissions for this session. It's going to go and do a little bit of data profiling, sample the content, see what's there, to try and understand what tasks and what components it can use to basically build our solution. Again, while we're waiting for Maya to do all the heavy lifting for us, you can put a whole load of different kind of instructions and prompts for Maya into that Matillion folder. So we could specify how we wanted to solve particular design patterns or problems. So at the moment, we're letting Maya design the solution for us, and it's using, and I'll explain what's going on here just now. It's using specific components to actually solve the problem. We could give it instructions to say, we actually want to use different components to solve the same problem, but using a particular design pattern so that our code and our is consistent. So as Maya carries on here, I'll try and explain what's actually happening here. So we've got various different components, and you'll see now, if you look at the top left-hand corner here, we've got a little green logo instead of the blue one that we had earlier on, and this has got a T in it. So this is a transformation job. And so we're taking data that already exists in Snowflake now, and we're doing some level of transformation to it. What we've got here is table inputs. So here, if I go and look on the right-hand side, this is basically a proxy for an actual table in your database. So it's selected a particular schema. We've identified the table. These are all drop-downs that you can select from. And we've selected specific columns from this table that Maya has identified that it needs to actually do the transformation. So you can go in here after Maya's done its work, you can go in here and still edit the code as a developer yourself. So you're not compelled to use Maya, but it can help you get a long way very quickly. You can see here, this is taken data from the stage table. So this is where the data is actually going to end up. This is going to be our destination in a minute. And so it's doing a left join here, essentially, to work out, does it already have that record or that MP3 file already extracted in a stage file? It's now got some, we'll get to this bit. It's now using this thing called a calculation. So essentially, this is like creating calculated columns or advanced like SQL syntax. So if we go down to transcription, we should see somewhere in here. Yeah. So here it's using that AI transcribe function on the audio file, on the actual MP3 content, and then it's extracted the duration and the transcript from the results of that JSON document. It's also worked out some additional things, like it's worked out the length of the transcript, so the number of characters, and it's also used these functions, array, size, and split, to basically count the number of words that are in the transcript as well. So again, just demonstrating how you can use various different functions inside of Snowflake's SQL syntax to actually do quite sophisticated like transformations. And then up here, it's actually going to load that data. If you want to sample the data at any point, you can click on any of these tasks, and you can go and preview the SQL that it's generating. So if you look at this task, This is the SQL that's actually running behind the scenes. If we go onto this task and we want to preview the SQL, we can see the left join that it's actually doing. Now, this doesn't actually run these step by step. Essentially, it's giving you a visual representation of the SQL. Ultimately, what's going to be run when we hit run in a minute is the final SQL query. So all of that code is going to be executed as one SQL query at the end. This is just giving you a visual representation of all the various different steps that you're going through and giving you the ability to actually edit the code in a very incremental way. So it really abstracts you from this level of complexity. If you're interested at any point, you can click on here and you can go sample data, and it will bring you back a sample of the actual records. So this is sampling our audio file table, and we can see what actual content exists. If we run the same thing here on this step when we sample it, and it might take a little bit longer now because it's actually going to go away and extract some data from these MP3 files, we can start to see the outputs from the actual code. So let's give this a run and see if it's going to work. And this might take a little bit longer because it's going through each of those MP3 files now, transcribing it into text and loading that into our staging table. So it says it's finished, so let's go and have a look. So cool. So we actually extracted all the data from those MP3 files. So this was the JSON response that we got. So if you click on any of these cells here inside of Snowflake, you'll see the data that's in those cells. So this is the JSON that was returned. This was the audio's duration. So that's 108 seconds. And here's the actual text from that transcript. We've then taken the contents from that JSON and we've split that out into separate columns now. So we've got the duration and we've got the actual transcript. So one thing to note in this transcript is, and these are all kind of made up in advance. So, they're great for demos. It might not obviously be like this in the real world, but the call center agent always introduces themselves at the beginning of the interaction. And we're going to use that piece of information or that knowledge that we have around the transcript to extract this person's name later on. Okay, so hopefully you've been able to follow along to now, and we've done all the data extraction and we've done all the staging of the data. We're now going to start asking some questions on this transcript to see if we can get some insights as to what's going on. So we'll go back to our lab. Oops, keep going there. And we'll go to this load. Oops. Sorry, we'll stick on step 6. So what we're going to do now is, up until now, the prompts that we've been giving Maia have been quite long, and they've basically been asking Maia to build end-to-end jobs, to build complete pipelines. What we're going to do now is go step by step to build a pipeline that looks like this. Now, if you wanted to, you're more than welcome to go and copy all of these prompts and combine them all together and paste them in one go. But I think for the purposes of understanding what's going on, it's easier to walk through them step by step. Cool. So we're going to copy this prompt and we're going to now go and build another job. So I'm going to close this one down. I'm going to clear my context and I'm going to ask Maia to create me a new transcript, or sorry, a new job. So whilst it's doing that, what I wanted to show you is, if you hadn't seen or you haven't been clicking around, if you click on this files button, you'll see the lab that we've been working through, or the folder structure. You'll start to see these are all the jobs that you've been creating. So we've got a folder where we've got all our extract jobs. We've got a folder now where we're going to create all our stage jobs. Again, just organizing our code in a way that makes sense. So this is how we typically organize our code on Datalab projects. But you might have your own standard. And again, you can give Maia instructions as to how and where to save certain types of job. So we're going to be busy building this analysis job now. So let me hide this away for now. So we're going to flip between these two screens quite a bit now as we get the various different prompts. So first prompt we want MAIA to do is create a connection to our source table and select a specific set of columns. So this will create a connection to a data source, and it will cherry pick these particular columns from that particular source. Whilst it's doing that, I'll show you that there's a whole list of different components that you can choose from. So if you're building these things by hand, there's a whole library of different components that you can choose. And these are like a wrapper over SQL syntax that you might be quite familiar with. So for example, like things like joins or intersect, or if you wanted to find the first or last values like window functions. When you're building with Matillion and doing these transformation jobs, you're essentially building pieces of SQL, and then it's combining all those together for you. So again, you're abstracting the users who don't necessarily know how to write SQL from actually having to know the syntax off by heart. They can just use a nice, friendly user interface to do the same thing. So it's added a table component for us. We can see that it's selected specific columns. So hasn't selected all the columns in the data source. We don't need those. And if we wanted to, again, we could sample this data and see what the data actually looks like in that table. Again, there's our call center transcript. There's our duration. Oops. There's our call center transcripts. There's the duration, there's the character count, there's the word count. Cool. Let's go back to our lab. And so now we're going to start using those Snowflake functions that we spoke about earlier on. So here we want it to use that cortex extract answer. So I'm telling it exactly which component I want it to use. Again, this is for the purposes of ensuring we all get to the same destination. But if you're having a conversation, you could equally just, ask a question like ensure that you can extract this kind of data, and the MAIA will go away and figure out which component to use. Because we're building the same pipeline, let's just clear this. So what we should see in a minute is a specific component being added here for a cortex extract component, and then we'll go and have a look and see what that's actually going to do in terms of extracting the call center agent's name. So it's added this component, and if we go and look inside here, it's chosen the transcript column. And here you can see the actual question that it's going to ask. So what is the name of the call center agent? And it's going to take the result of that and it's going to put it in this column called agent name _ AI. So again, we could sample this. So every time we're doing this sampling, it's actually obviously pushing down the SQL code into Snowflake itself for Snowflake to execute. And it's returning back to us a piece of JSON with the call center agent's name and a confidence score. Now, the reason that the confidence scores are so low is that it doesn't actually know that that's the call center agent. It's had a guess. It can see a name in the actual text. But if we had someone actually go, hi, my name's Lisa Johnson, I'm the call center agent, then the confidence score would be much higher. So we've been able to extract that piece of data. Let's go and add a few more transformations. So here we're going to summarize the transcripts. There is a newer version of MAIA that's going to be released quite soon, where the agent's much faster. So it's able to perform these development tasks much quicker. Cool. So again, it's used the transcript column. We can have a look at the code that it's creating if we're interested. So here we can see that it's got our previous question. We can see here it's using that Cortex Snowflake summarize. So again, it's translating these tasks that we've created here into SQL code that's actually going to be pushed down into Snowflake itself. If we want to sample this, we can see what it's going to actually do to that transcript. So we're taking this really quite verbose, long transcript, and we're now creating a very small summary of that. We'll crack on and add some of these other ones. So here we're going to do some classification, the sentiment analysis. Going to sample that data, see what it looks like now. So the sentiment here is positive, negative. So again, we can use this nice categorical data later on and maybe a bar chart or a pie graph as to show the number of calls and the types of sentiment that we're getting through that call. Now we're going to ask it to do something quite complicated. So we're going to ask it to do multiple things here. So we want it to use the AI complete function that we mentioned earlier on. And we want it to actually do various different pieces of analysis on the prompt. So we're going to copy this whole prompt. And while Maia's doing its work, I'll take you through what it's actually doing. Oops. Just wait for Maia to do what it was wanted to do. Cool. I'm going to paste in my prompt now. Cool. So whilst it goes away and figures all this stuff out, let's go and see what we've actually asked it to do. So we want it to add multiple columns to our data set. So we've got call type code, call status code, and call priority. And we want it to actually generate a sentiment score. These are the various different prompts that we're going to use. So we want it to categorize the call into one of the following. So billing, technical support, complaint, and we've given it a description as to what we classify as these particular types of category. And then we've told it down here, it must only choose one of those descriptions. And we've then asked it to look at the call status code. So was the issue resolved? Was it partially resolved, or was it not resolved? Again, we've asked it just to return one of those. We've asked it to look at call priority. So is this low priority? Is it medium, high, or is it critical? Again, this is for demonstration purposes. If you're doing this in real world scenarios, these prompts, the prompt engineering that you'd go through would be a little bit more verbose, a bit more sophisticated. But for the purposes of demonstration, we're trying to keep the prompts relatively short and small. And then we've asked it to actually give us a sentiment score. So rather than just a classification, we actually want a score between -1 and 1. So we've given it essentially 4 different prompts to kind of satisfy all in one go. And so I'm hoping that it's going to have chosen the right components and that it's actually going to add the right components here to be able to do that all in one go. So hopefully you can recall when we looked at the AI complete function earlier on, I mentioned that it was the Swiss Army knife of large language model functions. And I mentioned that you could choose various different models to use. So here you can see that it's chosen Llama 3 as the model that it's going to use to actually ask those questions. But we could choose any one of these large language models. So we've got OpenAI models in there. We've got Snowflake's own models. We've got Llama. We've got Claude. So you can choose the right model for the right type of question and the right challenge that you want it to solve. We've identified the input that we want to use, the transcript. And then if I click on outputs here, we can see that it's taken my questions and it's mapped them to the column name. So it's created column name with a prompt. So it's going to use this particular prompt to produce the outputs for this column. And so it's done a good job of identifying that we're going to ask multiple questions and that we need multiple columns to actually solve those answers. So if we sample this now, again, this might take a little while because it's going to be running through each of these for that 25 record sample. We've now got the call status code in here, the call priority code. We've got a sentiment score that hopefully should align with the labels that we had here of the various different sentiment classifications. We've got the call type in here as well. And so it's taken the unstructured data, the JSON response, and it's already translated that for us into these columns. So we didn't have to worry about how to transpose this JSON. The actual component itself is managing this for us. Again, we can go and have a look at the SQL that's being generated here if we want to know what's going on under the hood. We can see how it's actually transforming the JSON and pulling out the various different attributes and fields. We can see how it's doing all the prompt engineering here and how it's passed that through. So we've got full kind of transparency as to how we're going from our prompt to the code base and what's actually going to be executed inside of Snowflake. Almost done with all the prompt engineering stuff. We're now going to ask it to do a little bit more transformation for us. So let's paste this into Matillion and get MAIA busy while we go and have a look at what we're asking it to do. So here I want to add, earlier on we extracted that JSON which had the agent's name. Now I want to actually extract that attribute from the JSON document. So that's the first task. And then the second task is to basically clean up the code, uppercase the sentiment code. We're going to join to another table in a minute, which has actually got similar data. And then I've asked it to take the initials from the agent using a regular expression, so using a function called regex, to basically identify the initials of the first name and the last name to create a code for the agent. Again, just demonstrating the ability of MAIA to take these instructions and convert them into quite sophisticated SQL purely through a prompt. So it's still busy thinking about what it needs to do. So if you're a coffee lover, you'll have plenty of time to go and make a coffee whilst using MAIA. So again, here it's added these columns using this calculation component, and here's the code that it's actually using for each of these calculations. So you'll see this in the SQL. Let's go and have a look at the SQL. You'd see this in the SQL as individual columns. And then it's created a regular expression for us to actually extract the data. Sometimes it has a bit of trouble iterating on the regular expression. So you might have to engage with MAIA to actually work things out. So I can see here it's testing its own code already and coming back with a sample of results. So it's actually working through the problem itself and making sure that everything works. So we're going to sample the data now. And so hopefully what you're also identifying is I don't really need to keep switching in and out of Snowflake. I can do a lot of the tasks directly inside of Matillion itself. So here I've taken the agent's name, uppercase that, sentiment score, and I've extracted the agent initials as a kind of a proxy for a code. So pretty much all the data transformations that we want. The last one, I guess, or the last couple here, is to load this into a destination table. So I wanted to review that I've got all of these columns in my code. We've named things appropriately, and I want to insert those into a table called audio transcript analysis. Now, again, this pipeline from a transformation perspective is quite expensive. We're doing lots of stuff with the large language models here. We're extracting answers, we're summarizing, we're getting sentiment scores. We're using that complete function with multiple prompts, and we're doing some data transformation. So we don't want to do this again and again on all of the different records. So again, we want to try and make this process incremental and only reprocess data when we need to. So hopefully it's added a table insert component. And then the final prompt then is to make it incremental. So we'll take that and add that. We'll just let Maya do its thing here. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you could take all of those prompts, you could have put that all into one script, and we could have pasted that in one go and asked Maya to do all of these tasks at once. And so then what would be important for us is to basically version that prompt, because we can get back to the same end result by just pasting the prompt in there. And so prompt engineering and versioning your prompts is going to become increasingly more important when in a world where we have these kinds of tools to actually do the development work for us. I'm pretty confident that Maya's done what I wanted it to, so I'm going to stop it and then just put my last prompt in there. So while it's doing that, we'll just move forward onto the last, into the load process. So I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom. Cool. So ultimately what we want to do is we want to get to a point where we can load all of these different dimension tables, and then afterwards load our fact table. And so we're going to go through a process of building out these data transformation pipelines. And then ultimately at the end, we're going to create what we call a parent process, which is going to call all of those different tasks, all of those different jobs that we've created. It's going to call them in a very orchestrated manner in a particular, as a series of jobs, so that we can load the data warehouse proper. And so the end result should be a process that looks like this, where we would like in this scenario, we're going to truncate some tables. We're going to load all of our dimensions. When they've all finished, we're then going to go and load our fact table. We should have a repeatable process. And so this is going to be pulling data now from that staging table, pushing it all the way through a pipeline. So hopefully at the end of it, we end up with a nice star schema with all of the data loaded from beginning to end. So I'm just going to copy this now. So now we're on step 7. So I'm going to copy this prompt. I'm going to run this job so that we get some data loaded into our destination table. Okay, let's duplicate. Okay, let's ask Ryan to fix our errors. Just going to clear the context here. Oops, wrong job. Okay, let's try again. You can see its reasoning as it's going through here, trying to figure out what it's actually doing. If you want to see more details, you can kind of expand these boxes and see that it's found 50 rows, that it's read this many, and the kind of its thought process and its logic. So again, it's not a black box where you're sending in a request and you don't know what the actual model is doing behind the scenes. It's giving you like an idea of its thought processes and how it's trying to solve your problem. So I'm getting Maya to run all these things for me. So if there are any errors, it will already like identify what the error code is and the description of the error, and hopefully it will then start to try and solve any problems for me. So we're going to let Maya truncate this column for me. It's not really important to load that transcript. So again, in terms of debugging your code, helping you solve problems, things that would typically like maybe waste time as a developer, Maya's trying to help us out solve those problems. There's actually a new one for me, so something here is slightly different from previous versions that we've demoed this code. Okay, it's found a problem now with our extraction of the customer name or the call center agent name. Cool. So it's successfully run now. It might not have done all the things you would want it to do. So you could go through this process. If you're checking what it's done, we might not necessarily want it to truncate the data or truncate the code. We could spend some time to iterate on that. For the purposes of demonstration, we've been able to load our data into the analysis table now. So I'm going to scroll down here. We're just going to double check that it has got data in now. And so we can see we've got all of our columns of data in here. We've got the call duration, the number of characters, all the stuff that we might want to use. Okay, cool. Let's move forward then. So load, if we go to load ETL, step 7, we'll take some of these prompts now and see what I can do for us. Again, I'm going to clear my context, going to give it a new prompt. So here we're taking the data from that analysis table. We're going to load it into this agent dimension. I'm telling it what the unique identifier is. I want it to build me an incremental ETL process. So let's see what Maya does in terms of trying to understand prompt and how it interprets that into building an actual ETL pipeline. What I'm hoping it will look like is very similar to this, where we have the source of the data, where we actually have a filtering out for existing records, where it does some basic transformations and then loads the data into those dimension tables for us. So hopefully by now, and again, this is a transformation job. So we're writing SQL and transforming data, not integrating or trying to orchestrate pipelines. Some of these components now should feel quite familiar. So we've got our table component where we're basically identifying which tables we want to select columns from. Again, it's asking me for permissions because we've started a new job. It'll probably do some sampling on this data now, understand what data is in there. Because of some of the issues that we had extracting those agent codes, we've got some duplicates now. So your code might look slightly different to this, depending on how MAIA has actually solved the problem for you. So at any point in here, we could stop MAIA, we can give it different instructions. I'm going to let it run through and do its thing. So if we go and sample, we'll see what is MAIA doing now, or what the end result should be. So we're looking for something that looks more like this, where we get the agent code and we get the agent name and it loads that data in for us. So the large language model earlier on didn't do a great job for us in this scenario. It's extracted the name of the company as well as the name of the actual agent. But for the most part, it did a reasonably good job. We could iterate on this with various different large language models to get to the point, or change the prompt, make sure that this was more accurate. But for now, we'll stick with that and we'll run this code. Obviously, we're probably going to run out of time before we get to the end result. But let's see. So that was the agent. Now the call priority. So again, here we're asking it to do various different things in terms of, like, we're telling it which components we specifically want it to use to actually solve a particular problem. But it's going to go away and generate the actual pipeline for us. Cool. If anyone's got any particular questions around MAIA, Snowflake that they want answered in this session, feel free to put some questions in the chat. So in order for this dimension that we're building right now, this call priority, we're taking that data from that JSON document that we processed earlier on, and we're using that now as the source. So what you'll see here is, if we go and look at the sample of this data, we can see that we've got call type in there, we've got call priority, we've got all sorts of different data in that stage table, where we flattened that JSON document. We're now asking it to apply a filter to that data so that we only have, let's have a look, call priority. And then we're going to uppercase the results, make sure that we've got some consistency in the data. And then we're going to filter out. So here it's going to apply a left join in here to basically check whether that record or that code has been loaded before. So that's why telling it what the unique identifier is quite key. So it can use that to actually do that kind of validation. And then it's going to insert that data into the dimension for us. So again, if we look at the SQL that it's generated, if you're typing that by hand, there's some significant keystrokes there. We can let MAIA do all of this work for us. Now, you might be looking at the SQL and going, well, that's not particularly attractive SQL. So it uses a particular set of mechanisms and design patterns in Matillion to get to these kind of results. From an execution and performance perspective on top of Snowflake, it really doesn't matter that we've got these kind of nested select statements. So if we run this one now, hopefully this will execute without any challenges. While I'm waiting for that to run, I will just go and get the next prompt. Well, I think I did run. Let's just double check here. Priority. Cool. So it's loaded this table with these descriptions, the code, a priority, a longer priority description, and a sort order. Always useful when you're building models to define how you want things to be displayed. Let's close this down. Let's create our next one. So these are going to all follow a similar pattern because they're all coming from that extract table. They'll be flattened, so they should all look pretty similar in terms of the pipeline. There are different ways to build these kinds of solutions in Matillion. We've chosen this one because it's relatively easy to kind of see what's going on. Cool. We've got a couple more prompts to go. Hopefully we'll get this working before the time runs out. Cool. So I can see you guys have posted a couple of questions. Great. So in terms of how MAIA works, so it really is around context. Context is really key. I use the analogy when talking around context around if you were to give your 5-year-old child some instructions to go and make dinner, and you literally just said go and make dinner and sent them into the kitchen, you could come back with pretty much anything. But if you were to give them a set of instructions as to go into the fridge, pull out some cheese, go to the cupboard, get some bread, and you gave them some instructions as to what you wanted them to do, ultimately they'd end up hopefully building you a nice cheese sandwich. Now, as we get older and we have our own domain knowledge and we understand, when you say go make a cheese sandwich, you're able to go away and do those things on your own. That's a little bit like working with large language models. So some of the large language models that are built obviously with context around the world, you can ask them questions and they will know how to go and make a cheese sandwich. If you're trying to give your 5-year-old a set of instructions, then be declarative, tell them exactly what you want them to do. And so we can tell MAIA exactly what we want it to do by using those context files up here. So we can give it those specific sets of instructions and rules, how you want it to design things, or we can give it those instructions in the prompt itself. So it's a combination of these instruction files as well as the prompt that's going to determine how successful MAIA is. Now, additionally to that, MAIA is going to go off and do some additional things. It's going to look at the schema of your database. It's going to look at the schema of the sources. It's going to do some data profiling, and it's going to use some of its own inherent instructions that it's got to kind of build a solution for you. So in terms of how you use MAIA, like I said, we've given you very clear instructions today as to what to do and how to use it. And we've used a prompt template to basically try and get to a similar solution for everybody at the end of this. If you're using MAIA in a more conversational way, then it's around following along with what MAIA is doing, interacting with it as if it was a junior developer sitting alongside you. So give it clear instructions, give it a clear destination as to what you want it to try and build. If you know that there are issues in the data, explain those to MAIA. And it is experimentation and it is an iterative process as opposed to kind of firing and forgetting it. So at the moment, the current implementation of MAIA is, you can think of it as a developer aid. But as Matillion develop the product further, and as they build out the capabilities of MAIA, it will get to a point where it becomes more agentic, where you'll give it more in kind of instructions, and it will use its own kind of knowledge base to go and solve those problems for you. So right now, use MAIA as your digital workforce, as an extension of you to do the kind of mundane tasks. But looking forward, MAIA is going to become much more capable of doing these things on its own. So in terms of, great questions, Emil. So in terms of large language models that are, and here specifically we're talking about, so let me take a step back. So MAIA itself uses Claude behind the scenes. So all this reasoning that you see going on the left-hand side, this is a wrapper, a Matillion wrapper over Claude. So Claude's doing a lot of the thinking behind the scenes. It's generating a lot of the responses. But obviously, it's received a whole load of instructions from Matillion itself. So the MAIA kind of agent is built on top of Claude. In terms of the large language models that we looked at when we were looking at the AI complete function, there are different models that are better for different purposes. So there are models which have been built for conversational chat. So they respond in a very different way. They're much more kind of, it feels like you're talking to a human. They're much more kind of conversational. There are models which have got what they call context windows, so you can pass larger volumes of data to them. There are reasoning models. So like the latest releases of like the GPT models and Claude will actually do a level of reasoning and thought. So there are different models for different purposes. Some of the models, if you're trying to extract, for example, information out of an image, then you need what's called a multimodal model, a model that can interact with multiple different data types. So whether that be audio files or image files. And so you need to use the right large language model for your use case. The other thing to be mindful of as well is the cost of those models. So the larger the context window, the more information that you can push into your prompt, or you'll pay for that. And then the amount of information that you receive back will also determine how much you pay for that. So whether you're using Snowflake and all the large language models that it exposes, in general terms, what you'll pay for is the amount of information you send in a prompt and the amount of information you receive back. And so, again, choosing the right large language model will have a direct correlation to cost in those scenarios. They're great questions. If you are interested in exploring some of those large language models in Snowflake, for example, you can actually go to this feature here, AI and ML, and they've got this thing called Studio. So what you can do here is, if you want to experiment, you can go to Cortex Playground. And what you can actually do here is you can compare different models. So you can choose which models you want to actually use. You can enter a prompt in here. You can choose some data that you want from a table. I won't go through all of this now. So, for example, you could choose the transcript column. Let's try it. Stage scripts. I've chosen a database here which has got no information in it. Great. Basically, then you could choose the transcript column in here, and you can then it's going to hang here for some reason. But essentially, then you can ask, I'm going to cancel out of this, but then you can ask questions using different models at the same time. So when you type your prompt in here, it will run that prompt against two different models against the same data. And then you'll be in a position where you can see which model gives you like a nicer result. So it's a nice little like environment to do that. I'm going to run this job. And then we're not going to get to the end, unfortunately. But hopefully the session has given you a good grounding in like what's possible with Matillion, what it looks like. If you guys have got any additional questions you'd like to see or explore Matillion in any more detail, then like I say, you're welcome to reach out to myself, Reza, or William, who's also on the call. If you want to find out more about Snowflake, the same thing applies. Please reach out to us. And then, we're super cognizant of people giving up their time and coming to these kinds of presentations. And so, we're keen to recognise your efforts this afternoon. It's the first time that we've done one of these particular labs for Matillion online. But everyone who's attended today will send out a similar little certification to say that you've given up some time to actually learn about Matillion MAIA and AI labs. And so, with all of that, I hope that you've actually got some value out of the last 2 hours. I hope you have. We're very passionate about Matillion and Snowflake and how they can kind of transform your data engineering and data analytics kind of landscape. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And with that, I think that's a wrap.